Hey guys, it's been about 5 years since I last did a mouse review, but hey, I'm bored and locked down, so might as well do another one. And now, better late than never, because it's the dawn of ergonomic wireless mice, and it gets me a little bit excited, to say the least. Now to preface things right, the EC2A was my favorite mouse for the longest time. I absolutely adored it, even though it was heavy, it had a rubber cable, everything, but it was my best mouse by far. The shape is absolutely godlike. The G Pro Wireless, I used this prior to these two, and honestly, the best thing to take away from this is that the build quality, it's fantastic, and the battery life, absolutely top tier for what, like a 300 milliamp hour battery or something. And this is modded as well. So it has Khalil GM 4.0 clicks, and it's perfectly snappy, very tactile, super loud. I absolutely love it, just to emulate, you know, what a fresh Zowie was like. Unfortunately though, it is asymmetrical shape, and I like to palm grip my mouse, so I don't really like it at the end of the day. Eventually I did get used to it and get good with it, but unfortunately this was the first mouse that I used that over time, trying to get used to it, my pinky and ring finger was actually sore from trying to adapt and just hold the mouse. Because, you know, hands are not symmetrically shaped, so why should a mouse be symmetrically shaped? Sure, I guess it'll work if you're like, you know, fingertip grip or something, but for me, someone who palms it, it was an absolute pain to get used to initially. It took me a long time to finally get used to the shape of the G Pro Wireless. But enough about those two, let's get on to the Pulsar Xlite Wireless and the Ninjutso Origin 1X. Now, I'll start with the Origin 1X, right? This is the very first batch, the early adopter batch. So what it means is it has the bad coding, which you can kind of see, right? My sweat and everything on it. It's awful. You can play around with it, and as soon as you put your hand on it, it'll come off with like patches and like just sweat. Apparently they fixed it with later iterations, and later on down this month, I believe, they'll be launching a program to help the original first adopters to change out the top shells and maybe ship you an extra set of feet as well, just to help you out, you know, give you what's best once they acquire the materials to actually make it. The coating, definitely for the Ninjutso, it was not ideal. It worked, but it was not ideal. You always had to clean it. Eventually, I kind of just couldn't be asked. The Pulsar, out of the box, very slightly textured surface, and you can kind of feel the difference between the two, right? But much more sweat and dirt resistance. You can just tell right away. Holding it, it's much smoother and cleaner to the touch. Also, the clicks right now between the two. The Ninjutso, these mice both use Khalil GM8s. Perfectly fine. It's the standard go-to nowadays. Apparently, everyone wants to use Khalil switches, not the Omrons. I want to talk about the click sound, or how tactile it is, because they both feel basically exactly the same, in my opinion, right? Nothing too out of the ordinary, but the Pulsar sounds quieter and the Ninjutsos are louder, but I wouldn't really take that into account, because remember, this is a solid shell and this has a lot of holes in it. One gaping hole at the bottom, so it may actually affect the acoustics. So really just don't take the actual click sounds into consideration to this, to say the least. The side switches, I think for the Ninjutsos, it uses Khalil GM8 as well, which is perfectly fine. They're clicky, they're tactile, it does its job. This, however, it's much more tactile, and there's no pre-travel, or so they say nowadays. But however, the side switches, apparently they are Huanos, which, look, I'm perfectly fine with. It doesn't really matter that much to me. 66 grams, 58 grams. It's a small change, and you do feel it. It will take me some time to get used to it, but that's not a big deal. Now, in terms of the charging cable, right, the Ninjutso's charging cable, it's the paracording, it's better in my opinion, just slightly more flexible, but both are wireless mice, so if you're using them with the charging cable on, then you're probably doing something wrong. Use them wireless, it's what they're intended for. But one small quality of life thing, the dongle. The Ninjutso's dongle, it's fine, right? Solid piece of aluminum, metal. It does its job. But however, for the Pulsars, I'll pull this off real quick. It's plastic, but there's a very nice touch. At the bottom, the base is rubber. So what it means is if you put it on your desk, it will not slide at all. It stays put. But the Ninjutso, you know, it'll go around because it's metal. That was one of the first things I noticed after installing the Pulsar. Now, the charging cable as well for the Ninjutso, I want to mention, once again, I had the early adopters edition. So for the price that I paid for, about 110, 120 or something, shipping included, of course, it was a real bummer because the charging port, the tolerance was too tight for the cable. I had to force it in, and even when I did, the cable will make like these ungodly squeaking sounds, and it was just made me feel, what the hell is this? Sure, it's it's their first product, but you would think that something as important as that, they maybe pre-tested it. With the later editions, they seem to have fixed the issue, but just saying, it wasn't the most enjoyable thing. I had to manually sand down the charging cable just so it would fit in smoothly. And a downside is, if you want to go for the magnetic USB-C charging cable attachments, you can do it for this because the charging hole is much more shallow compared to the very deep one of the Ninjutso. Out of the box, the battery life for Ninjutso 48 hours on a 500 milliamp hour battery. That's what the box says. This is 300 milliamp hours, and it gets you one extra day, 70 hours compared to the 48. And it's just a little bit confusing because how? The battery is smaller in this, and yet it lasts longer than the Ninjutso. I would like to assume it's perhaps because of the software or how both mice manage the power, or maybe it's the sensor. I don't know. I'm not an expert on that. But just saying, I will probably be testing this a little bit further, and if it does promise to live up to its 3-day battery life, I'll be very impressed. I also want to say, though, the Ninjutso, one thing I don't like about it is when the battery is low, there is an LED at the bottom that will apparently flash red, but it's at the bottom. You will never see it on a solid mouse, especially when you're gaming. This is the first wireless mouse I've had that the battery has ran out on me on 2 or 3 separate occasions, and it's something that caught me very much off guard. So I do intend to actually mod the battery for a 900 milliamp hour, and hopefully it helps things a lot, but unfortunately it will increase the weight to maybe about 70 grams. I'm not too sure. We'll find out a little bit later. The Pulsar, however, because it's hollow, right, they actually have an LED at the very bottom right there, and it will shine hopefully red when the battery is low. I haven't actually managed to run down the battery yet, and for now I have turned off the LED because normally when it's on it will shine in whichever color the DPI is set to. And I've turned it off to obviously get more battery life out of this little thing. So hopefully turning the LED off, it will still flash red when the battery is low. Because if it doesn't flash red, then it kind of defeats the purpose of having that option in the software, I would say. Which brings me to another actual point. Software. This does have software. Very bare bones, very simple. It gets the job done. You can adjust the D-bounce. You can adjust the DPI, macros, lift-off distance, which is maybe a thing for the 3370 sensor. I've set this to 1mm. This is default at 2, and I like this a little bit better. I like lower lift-off distances. Plus, also, you don't need the software to actually use the mouse. Apparently, you can adjust the DPI using keyboard combinations, BED or something. I haven't tested it out, and honestly, it's a little bit confusing. Not a big deal. Which unfortunately does actually, make the Ninjutso slightly better. They have a dedicated DPI switch button, and that's just handy, because if Zowie has it and a lot of other mice have it, why shouldn't, your mouse have it? Just having a DPI quick switch button just makes life so much easier. But the Xlite, no buttons, only an on-off. They have it in software and allegedly a keyboard combination, which may honestly work out to be a better solution. Granted, I haven't managed to get it to work, so whatever, it is what it is. So they both each have their cons and each have their pros. Now onto their mouse feet between the two. The Ninjutso comes with an extra set inside the box. Both are Virgin PTFE. They glide well. It is what it is. But however, for the early adopters edition, right, the DPI button for the Ninjutso, it tends to maybe stick out just a little bit. And people say they claim it scratches on their mouse pad as well, even over the mouse feet, which is unfortunate. But I want you to notice the thickness of the Ninjutso's mouse feet. It's kind of flush with the mouse, right? The Pulsar, no spare feet in the box, but they claim it's rounded on the edges, and check this out. It's thick. It makes it look flush, and it's hard to tell on camera, but by eye, it's about double the thickness of what the Ninjutso gives you, which I would say, thanks, it's very helpful. But if you want to change, anything inside the mouse, the switches, or to open it up for whatever reason, you'll have to get spare feet, and hopefully when aftermarket brands come out, I'll switch it out for core pads or Tiger Arcs, that kind of stuff. The weight, it doesn't really make that big of a difference to me at this point. I think 66 grams versus 58, sure, it's an 8 gram difference, but it won't take too long to get used to it, so I won't talk too much about that. But then again, one thing I want to mention is that this mouse, it's solid at 66 grams, so if it had holes the exact same style as the Pulsar, would it perhaps be even lighter? Because this thing, you know, it has the pill-shaped holes on the sides, which I've applied tape over, and of course the back, and there's a huge gaping hole at the bottom. You can just stick your finger right in to get 58 grams. Maybe the PCB could be smaller, or maybe the mounting bracket for the battery could be removed or made even lighter or thinner to reduce weight further without having to have such a gaping hole. I know that the latest Pulsar, the one with the glass feet, it actually has solid sides, and it maintains like a sub 50 gram weight, which is pretty pog. So if they do actually want to make a secondary revision on the Xlite wireless with solid sides while still maintaining the super lightweight, then that might honestly be a cop. For now, I'll use the grip tape that's included, no, that I had to buy, sorry, extra, and I'm liking the experience so far. The sensors of the two, apparently the 3370 is the better sensor, maybe more adjustments, maybe more accurate, that's all I can tell, but I don't think Pixar actually sells the 3370 to like smaller companies or something to that extent, which is why the Ninjutso had to use a 3335. Apparently that's what I read somewhere in the comments, don't quote me on that. And now the ergonomics, right? Shape is king. Shape is absolutely king. Symmetrical mice, hell no, I don't like it. The EC shape for me has been the best. I've just gotten so used to it. As soon as you put your hand on it, it feels amazingly comfortable. And now the Pulsar, right, Xlite wireless, it's the exact same basically shape as the EC2, but slightly bigger across the dimensions, the length, the width, and the height. And upon holding it, it feels comfortable, a shape I'm very familiar with. And I want you to notice one thing, right? The diagonal curvature or the slope of my hand when holding the Pulsar, it's slightly angled that way, which will take me some more time to get used to because it changes how I place my hand and how I aim with it. The Ninjutso, which I've been using for quite a while now, different dimensions, and the Microsoft IntelliMouse Pro or something shape. Upon using it, the first thing that was very jarring was the extreme curvature of the thumb groove, which over time I got used to, and honestly it's comfortable. The pinky and ring finger side curves, it's fine. That's not a big deal, but the thumb was definitely something that made me very aware initially upon using this mouse. And holding it as well, it's a flatter profile, different dimensions, and notice the diagonal. It's nowhere near as steep as the Pulsar. So this is a flatter mouse with good ergonomics, and honestly, it may be the bread and butter for some people. The Pulsar, once again, look at that. It's slightly more exaggerated, just slightly, the diagonal curve. Now, going forward, I am going to use the Pulsar a little bit more, just to see if I can get used to it and see if I like it, because once again, I'm a sucker for the EC shape, and people saying they're like, oh, you're getting excited for another EC shape, I can't believe you. Yes, I'm gonna get excited for another EC shape because it's the best shape I've used thus far, by far, compared to any other mouse, and it's just so comfortable. I use the Myonix Caster as well, which they promised to be the most ergonomic and comfortable mouse in the past. It's okay, a little bit too comfortable maybe, but it's more the fact that these mice, it's kind of no frills and your hands just rest naturally at certain angles, right? But the Caster back then, there was a specific area in which your pinky went, a specific area where your ring finger went. It was all very organized, and maybe I just wasn't quite used to that. I like to have maybe my fingers together or something. Not too sure. I palm my mice. I don't think it's a grip it. It is what it is. And to basically end things off, right? The pros and cons of both, just to sum it up, the most glaring issues, obviously, the ergonomics are different. The battery life is the biggest thing. 48 hours versus 70, and this could potentially be more if you turn off the LED, potentially. And if you want to mod the battery from 300 milliamp hours to 500, then you might get more out of this sucker to bring the weight even out of 58 grams to maybe even 60 something. So it's a very baffling concept to me. Later on down the road, though, Ninjutso, they would say they would help first edition owners replace the top shell to get the better coating. I hope it does happen, and honestly, it's a small thing to really consider. Nowadays, the Ninjutso mice, I think they are a solid choice if it's what you like. The ergonomics and of course the flatter profile, it may favor fingertip grippers, etc. more. My hands are about 18 by 11 centimeters, and this thing, it's large. It's a big mouse, don't get me wrong, but palm gripping it, which is what I like, I feel perfectly at home. The Model D, however, that was a big bloody mouse, and I could not get used to it with the size of my hands. So yeah, going forward, I'll use the Pulsar a little bit more, and hopefully it becomes my main, and I absolutely adore it. However, there will be a new contender soon. That is the Coolmaster MM731. And looking at it on paper, it's very promising. Full solid mouse, no holes, and it's basically sub 60 grams as well. I don't know how they did it, but it's just an absolute feat of engineering. Very crazy ergonomics as well, so honestly, it could be more comfortable than both of these, but the switches on that, they aren't optical switches, which people claim to be very mushy and not as comfortable. If you can mod it out and you have, you know, the expertise to do so, then you might honestly have a real breadwinner in the Coolmaster. And obviously, the battery life for the Coolmaster, let's just see how well it does as well. Aftermarket feet for all mice, it should be stock standard if you want to get the absolute most performance out of your mouse. But for now, solid 66 grams, it's good. Battery life, pretty poor. That's what I don't like about it. And the coating, for my edition, I don't like it. And the ergonomics, slightly weird, but over time you do get used to it, and it feels great. This EC shape, very familiar, comfortable. You'll like it. You put your hand on it, you'll feel comfortable at home ASAP. But it has holes. It may be a no-go for some people. A gaping hole at the bottom, has software, and no DPI button on the mouse itself. But it has an LED to warn you when your battery is low, hopefully, and also an LED to tell you which DPI your mouse is set to, which isn't the biggest issue in the world. So guys, thank you for watching, and a bit of a long video. It is what it is. See you next time.